Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm here with John Keats' Ode to a Nightingale. Ode to a Nightingale is one of the famous six odes John Keats has written in the short period of his activity as a poet. This ode is categorized alongside John Keats's other odes: Ode on Melancholy, Ode on Indolence, To Autumn, Ode on a Grecian Urn, uh, this one, Ode to a Nightingale, and Ode to Psyche. In Ode to a Nightingale, Keats uses the occasion of writing a poem to talk about the nature of imagination. Imagination is one of the key terms and key words, key ideas of Romanticism. Romantic poetry is defined alongside the notion of parallel to the notion of imagination. And here, John Keats mingles the presence of nature as a site of as a place of insight and inspiration, and then the commingling of nature and what nature can give to the mind, which activates the imagination. So let's see what is happening in the text of the poem. And before reading the poem, I have to remind you that based on the historical record we have, it is most probable that a real occasion had inspired the poem to be written. John Keats died at the age of 26, and he was sick for a long while. He suffered from TB, and he had also experienced the death of many of his family members. So death was a presence all the time in his life, and he always knew that he will die soon. We have to notice what Keats had experienced about death and how death is represented in this poem. He always kept an eye on death. He knew that death would come sooner or later. And based on a real occasion, he wrote the poem. He was sick. He was a guest in the villa of one of his friends, and the friend reported that one day one morning, we saw John sitting on a chair under a tree, and then he came back home, or anyway, in on that very chair, he took a piece of paper, and he wrote something, and we guessed that that something was the poem Ode to a Nightingale. Ode to a Nightingale, again, as an ode, but the poet, instead of just eulogizing or using the function of an ode, the original function, utilizes the genre for his own ponderings and meditations about the processes involved in writing of a poem or the procedures of imagination in the mind of the poet. So he had made a personal use of ode. Instead of just writing an ode to praise someone or something, he wrote an ode, and he had dedicated the ode to the nightingale. But it is not just about the nightingale. It is the poem is like an opening up to the mind of the poet. So let's see what is happening in the regular form of this ode. Just let me turn on my speakers so that we can listen to the sounds as well. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness, I'm sorry, pains my sense. This is the first reaction to listening to the nightingale. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk. He has a feeling, but he's trying different ways to depict that feeling. So at first he says it's like numbness, it's like drowsiness, it's like a heartache, and it is like then as if of hemlock I had drunk. Hemlock is a poisonous uh, plant, so uh, in the early ages, the people were being killed by this poison. My sense says the numbness in his pains, which is the after effect of listening to the nightingale, is like being exposed to a venomous kind of drink, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or he's not satisfied. He tries to make it more clarified, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains, or maybe I have drunk something, a drink made out of opium. So the sound of the bird is at first like a drowsy numbness, it's like a pain, but then in the series of the descriptions of the poet, it turns to opium, and it is maybe helping the poet to kill the pain he's experiencing. So the experience or the feeling the poet has towards the sound of the bird changes throughout the poem. And then he once again changes his idea. He changes his mind. 1 minute passed, and Leithwards had sung. And after listening to the bird for 1 minute, then he starts to forget the world. Leith is the name of the river of forgetfulness in the Hades or in the underground, which is a mythical kind of afterlife in Greek, form of mythologizing the world. So 1 minute passed and Leithwards had sung. He starts to forget that the sound of the bird at first is like a painkiller maybe, and now it's like wiping out the memory of the poet. It's not through envy of the happy lot. I experience all these, but it is not because I'm envious of you. And lot here means song story, but being too happy in thine happiness. I'm happy. I'm not sad. And because of this happiness, I try to forget what's on in the world. What are the pains? That thou light winged dryad of the trees. Dryad means the angel. Dryad means a being with two wings. And here the bird has two wings. That winged dryad of the trees, you're like angels. You're like a fairy among the trees. In some melodious plots, narrating a melodious story, this melodious story is made out of beech and green. Beech and green is the forest green. So your sound, which is actually having a thing to do with our auditory faculty, is made out of beech and green, which is a color and has something to do with our visual faculty. And here, John Keats is making something which is called synesthesia, a mingling of the senses. So of beech and green and shadows numberless, your song is made out of beech and green and shadows numberless, something again visual. Singest and you singest of summer and full throated ease. You're singing in a way that there is no pain in it. That you're in full kind of command of the song, like this. And then the second stanza of the poem starts. The poet is still engaged in uh, describing or giving us a sense, giving us an image um, of, of the feeling he has when the bird starts singing and while he's listening to the bird. Oh, for a draught of vintage. Draught here means a drink. For a draught of vintage, drops of vintage. For a draught of vintage, vintage is not wine or something. That's so. At first, it was like using opium or hemlock or drinking from the waters of Lethe and forgetfulness. But now he changes his mind once again. It's the sound of the bird and the effect it makes is like being drunk. So, for a draught of vintage that has been cold a long age in the deep delved earth. But this is not just Ivra wine. It's the wine which is made out of nature. It is it is the sweet wine, the sweet drink of nature. It's like when I am listening to you, it is like I am drinking nature. And once again, we have the co-mingling of two different senses. And the bird has engaged his senses like that. He now tastes something while he's listening to the bird. So he tries to categorize the qualities of that specific wine. It tastes of what? Tasting of flora and the country green. It tastes of flowers and the country green. And you see again, different senses are mingled. Tasting, then olfactory senses, a country green, visual, and it also tastes like dance. Like it tastes like movement of the body, but like the harmony. It tastes of dance and Provençal song. Provence is a place famous for its dances and songs and summers, and and the wine, the good wine, tastes like all of them. So the sound of the bird, just to remind you, is tasting like these to the ears and the mouth of the poet. And it also tastes uh, of sunburnt mirth, a sunburnt happiness. Sunburnt here is not used in a negative sense, it's positive. Sunburns in sunny weather reminds the English John Keats of something he doesn't have, sunny weather. So he's wishing for the sun, and then as we see, he's uh, thinking of the southern parts of Europe, and its warmth. So uh, he again talks about the quality of the wine, the taste of it. Offer a beaker, a glass full of the warm south. It's a glass full of the warm south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene. Hippocrene is spring of the spring of, let's say, insightfulness and inspiration in Greek mythology. When the poets went to the Hippocrene, they drank a beaker or a glass of the wine coming out of this spring Hippocrene, which was all red. They drank from it, and then they could be inspired. They could write poetry. And here the poet is starting up a new type of a topic in the poem, that the bird song is also activating my imagination, and it's inspiring me to do something. So it's full of the true, the blushful. The blushful here means red, hippocrene, with beads, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim. Oh, you've seen it, and just that there are bubbles, and they are the winking is like the explosion of that small bubble, but beaded bubbles winking, and they are beaded because they are small bubbles connected like a bead, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple stained mouth. So I have drunk from it, and my mouth is now purple. That I might drink, but while I'm drinking from your song, that I might drink and leave the world unseen. I'm tired from this world. And your song helps me to imagine an alternative kind of a world. And with thee, so with your song, with thee fade away into the forest dim. So I want to drink from your song, get drunk, and then start flying over the forest in which we're living and singing. And this way, the second stanza ends, and the third one starts. He continues, but by the repetition of the last part of the previous stanza to fade away, and continues the topic of the poem, fade far away, dissolve, even dissolve in nature, and quite forget what thou among the leaves hast never known, to forget the world and the worldly things, the weariness. And then he lists the world in which he's living, the weariness, the fever, and the fret, yeah, where men sit and hear each other groan. Here, no communication is there. No one is singing to one another. When we see one another, how are you? I'm not fine. I'm bad. I'm suffering from fever. And John Keats really suffered from fever. Here, where men sit and hear each other groan, where pulses shake a few sad lost gray hairs. When you start the old age kind of palsy, you're shaking, you're normal stable, and then you're moving in lost gray hairs, they're also moving without shake. So you're old. You get old in this world. You cannot, and you die, and you cannot stay young. But in the world of imagination that the bird inspires you to get into, you can also think that you stay long everlastingly. But in this world where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, you lose your youth and then you die. Where but to think is to be full of sorrow. When you think, sorrows come to you. Where but to think is to be full of sorrow. And leaden-eyed despairs. That the despairs make you leaden-eyed. The weight of the despairs, the weight of the sorrows are on your eyes. Where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, where beauty fades away too, where beauty is not everlasting, or new love pined them. Pined, the referent of them is eyes. Pined them, the eyes, beyond tomorrow. And each day our eyes seeks a new love. So love is quite changing every day. That beauty is also changing. And you see, beauty and love are treated as goddesses or living beings as they are capitalized, like the characters in the story. And then here John Keats says the reason, states the reason for which he prefers living this world. So let us move on to the fourth stanza. And then he's in that fade away kind of mood. Away, away, for I will fly to thee. Not charioted by Bacchus and his parts. I'm not even needed to be drunk. I'm drunk enough. Why? Because I have my imagination, but on the viewless wings of poesy. Poesy here is imagination, poesy with a capital P. The faculty of poetry, the faculty of poetry composition, poetry like poetry incorporation. So I have the viewless wings of poesy. I have my imagination. No need to be drunk. No need to eat from the opium. No need to eat from the waters of least, or even the hypocrite. I have my imagination. Not, but so not charioted by Bacchus and his parts. We know Bacchus, the god of wine, had a chariot, and the chariot was carried by leopards. So he's referring to that idea here, but on the viewless wings of poesy. Though the dull brain perplexes and retorts, though my dull brain says, oh, stop it, stop it, stop it, already with thee, tender is the night. I'm deaf to him. I'm not listening to the voices of my rationality. Oh, you cannot go. This is just an imagination. No, I can totally silence my brain, my rationality, my reason, my logic. And then imagine I'm flying with thee, already with thee, tender is the night. Tender is the Night is also the title of a novel written by the American novelist F. Scott Fitzgerald. Actually, Fitzgerald's title is an allusion to this line. of John Keats' Ode to a Nightingale, just as a trivia to know. And happily, perhaps, the Queen Moon is on her throne. We are in the depth of the forest. We cannot see what is in the sky. We are just under the numberless kind of trees and there are parts in their leaves, so we cannot see what is above. So happily, so perhaps the Queen Moon is on her throne, clustered round by all her starry face. So we are in total kind of a darkness, clustered around by all her starry face. And face are fairies, and they are metaphorically referring to the stars. But here there is no light. And we are in the darkness of the mind, where you have to imagine what is there. So the light of the world is shut down, and now the light of the mind is in there. The lamp of the mind is now uh, enlightening the mind of the poet, the imagination. Save, there is kind of a light, save what from heaven is, where the breeze is blown through verdurous, so many glooms and winding mossy ways. But it is not important. We can ignore it. It's not so much. So they are in darkness, in the depths of the forest. Then the John Keats had shut his eyes. The bird is singing, and he imagines he's flying with the bird in the darkness of the forest. And now he narrates his imagination to us, what he does see and what he does hear in that condition. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, so I have to imagine them, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs. And he is also engaging different senses. I cannot see what flowers, I cannot also smell, nor what soft incense's perfume hangs upon the boughs. But in embalmed darkness, in a kind of a darkness which gives solace, in embalmed darkness, guess each sweet wherewith the seasonable moth endows. And then he imagines what can be in the forest. The grass, the thickets, the something like the grass, and the fruit tree wild, white hawthorn, and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, the coming masquerose, full of dewy wine. The dews have the smell, the scent of the flower, dewy wine, that um, they can give you the feeling of drunkenness. And suddenly, in the last line of this stanza, the fourth stanza, he moves from visual images, the flowers, and also images related to the sensation of the perfumes. He moves to auditory sensation, the murmurous haunts of flies on summer eves. Like this. And now the fifth stanza of the poem starts. Darkling amid the darkness, darkling I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death. In this darkness, I'm reminded of death. I told you, death is a character in John Keats' poetry. He knew that his life is always under the shadow of death. He was sick. He had lost many family members. He had experienced many deaths in his life. So he was waiting for the death. And now in this condition, he is reminded of death. Darkling, I listen. And for many times, I have been half in love with easeful death, called him soft names in many a mused rhyme, to take into the air my quiet breath. I make songs and make poems for death, to give me an easy life, not as if I'm bribing death so that death would also make it easy for me. Now more than ever seems it rich to die. Now that I'm listening to you, now that I'm in full imagination, It's rich to die, to seize upon the midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy, like this, still, still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain. Your song continues. It's like that your song is eternal, but I'm mortal. I will die. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, and my ears cannot hear because I'm dead. As easily as that. To thy high requiem become a sod, and I will become part of the nature. I will become a sod. I will become a piece of grass. I'm back to my origins, to the mother nature, while you're singing, and you're also part of the nature. And here he talks about the immortality of the bird. Thou wast not born for death, immortal bird. No hungry generations tread thee down. Like the younger generation in human beings were always trying to say, we are better than the elder generation. This is not happening in the world of this bird. This bird is like the king of his world. The voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and count, because you're immortal. Perhaps the self-same song that found a path through the sad heart of Ruth. Then it's even back, not only back in the days of the emperors and the counts, but also in the days of the biblical character of Ruth, when sick for home, she stood in tears amid the alien corn. Uh, Ruth was a young woman whose husband died just a while after their marriage. Her mother-in-law insisted on her going back to her own family and her own tribe, but he wanted to be where her husband was. So Ruth was always homesick and sorry, but she preferred to be there. And he says, Ruth had also listened to you. She stood in tears amid the alien corn. The same that ofttimes your song is the same that ofttimes has charmed magic casements opening of the foam of peerless seas in fairy lands forlorn. In the world of magic, in the world of Bible, in the world of history, your song was always the same because you are the one, you're unique, you're one of a kind, you're immortal. And then he says, like the of peerless is in fairy. Fairy is spelled like that, and it's a case of archaism, the intentional misspelling of the word, or using the old spelling to give an archaic, old, ancient kind of a sense to your poem. And he uses the word forlorn here. In the next stanza, which is the last stanza of the poem, also starts with the word forlorn, and we are going to get the poem forlorn after this stanza. Forlorn, the very word is like a bell to tell me back, forsaken, like lonely, to toll me back from thee and my soul's self. Adieu, the fancy cannot cheat so well. The imagination could not cheat me so well. It was only short term. Adieu, the fancy cannot. Goodbye, the fancy cannot cheat so well as she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Adieu, adieu, thy plaintive anthem fades. The bird starts flying away, and he can no more hear the bird's song, so he is forlorn, and the bird's song is not there, and all of a sudden he's back to the real world. Past the near meadows, his song or his anthem fades past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now it's spirit deep in the next valley glades. He can no more hear the bird. And he's back to his senses. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled us that music. Do I wake or sleep? Thank you very much for listening.